Do you think Epstein had any money in Quibi? Like, I don't know if you remember Quibi, like the platform that was all about like really tiny short form content. Right before this, like short form content exploded, actually. So they were just like too far ahead, if anything. But I think loads about companies with just a bad premise that like either made too much money for a while or like made no money. Juicero, Theranos. Do you think Jeffrey Epstein put money in Theranos? That would be so good.
I'm Googling right now. Epstein, Theranos. Let's see. Let's what do we got? Um, doesn't think so. No, no, it doesn't look like it. No,
I'm sure his money via other guys
like she raised hundreds of millions of dollars from venture capitalists, private investors,
for
and all
for
that
a
kind of
thing that
stuff.
takes
Like,
people's blood. Like
yeah,
he's
yeah,
got to be into that.
Oh yeah.
This wasn't the Epstein intro we wanted. My mind blanked on like I was like, yeah, I'll do the cold open, and then I was like, it's Epstein something. I was just
yeah, yeah.
thinking about Quibi. Um, Apparently they murdered him a day early because they were so anti-pedophile that they wanted
Yeah,
to kill
yeah,
him as fast as possible. I
yeah,
don't know if
yeah.
people have seen this, but the statement about his death, one of the files that's been leaked is that's been published is yeah, is the statement about his death signed a day early and like slightly differently worded. It's just it's a bit much.
It's a bit like, yeah, like one of those things where you just go, oh, oh, right. Which there's been plenty of with like these file releases and more scrutiny over what has been what happened there and stuff. There's like so many moments where I've been like, no, that's just some conspiracy, but like that's just some one, whatever. And then it's just like those are the parts that are actually true. And then like like the things that people are making up are the more fucking mundane things or whatever.
Yeah,
Um,
the thing that's been doing my head in is like the food code, the like them emailing each
oh
other
yeah,
and
yeah.
like they actually had a food code. It seems that way, but I
Mm.
like as someone who studies a lot of misinformation, I like to try and maintain a really strong like null hypothesis or whatever, but it's getting harder and harder to do where I'm like,
Yeah, yeah,
maybe
yeah.
this guy had really restrictive eating habits and he just like only ate beef jerky and it really
Yeah,
just
yeah.
is beef
Who's
jerky.
just a steak and muffins guy? Who's just steak
Yeah,
and
he was
muffins?
just a steak and muffins guy.
Well,
Like,
that's like
I'm
because I
like,
saw, yeah, I saw Joyce Carol Oates posting about the muffin and steak thing and stuff, and people being like, "Oh no, like it's not that," because throughout these documents they talk openly about what they're doing. So why would they need a food code here? Plus, like like he was like there was someone on staff that like one of their cooks whatever was really well known for making muffins, and it's like, and then she's like, oh, but like this conversation is between completely different people, and all this kind of stuff, and it's like, oh, when you put it that way, that is really weird, like
there's a bunch of stuff that sticks out to me. Like, you've got like two steaks on the island. Do you want me to bring more? It just seems like a bizarre thing to
yeah, yeah,
say. Like, were
exactly,
you
yeah, yeah.
bringing individual steaks across to your island? You just keep it. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see as things
Yeah, yeah,
develop. We'll
yeah.
just have to be crazy in the meantime.
I
It's Red
know.
Planet. Let's start like we always do by asking what's the most base thing you did this week, Tim.
There was another Free Palestine protest the other day. This one was interesting because there has never been a significant Zionist presence at any of them. But I found out afterwards. I found out through photos from Letters for Palestine on Twitter, who they're a group that have been doing Palestine advocacy for years. It's like a lot of older people and stuff. I think it's in anyway. They posted about how a bunch of three IDF soldiers came down. Like obviously on holiday down here in New Zealand, came down and started like pushing people around and harassing them, including like there's like some elderly person that got pushed around by one of these three, which I mean, yeah, and maybe it happened after I left, or, like I just didn't see it or whatever. But yeah, which is crazy because firstly, it's like, I feel like we should be doing like what other countries are doing, where they're actually monitoring, like if Israeli people are coming through, being like, oh, okay, were you active service? Did you, were you in Gaza? All this kind of stuff, vetting them and making sure we don't have fucking Nazi stormtroopers running around, especially like like kind of attacking and like intimidating New Zealand citizens and stuff. But yeah, so that was interesting. But yeah, what about you? What about you, Soph? What did you been up to lately?
I've been doing some organizing I can't super talk about. Last week I talked about providing the food for it. My hat got soaked in milk. That was a terrible time. My hat is all the way free of milk now. That's the most bit. No, I have been doing more. I've met with the people again, but I can't talk about it. So my base thing is my nice clean hat. It's no longer full of milk. Mule. I really called you milk.
You nearly called me milk. You
DJ
nearly
Milk, what
called
Milk.
me
did you
milk.
base this week?
What did I milk base this week? The most base thing that I did this week was nothing. It's not my turn. It was my turn for the first 2 years of Red Planet. Now I'm just in the pit of nothingness. No, I've been doing quite well. In terms of like self improvement and looking after myself. I've been being a bit disciplined. I've been meditating pretty much every day this week. I think I only missed like 2 days. And it has been really good for my mindset on how I approach the day. Obviously, every time I stream, I look at all the horrors that are happening in the news, and there's been a lot of horrors over the last couple of weeks, last month, and it has definitely had like a marked improvement on my psyche when it comes to actually dealing with that stuff. So no super base stuff from me this week, but as I said, a little bit of discipline there. And if you want a bit more of a filled out section, a bit more of a weighty based thing section, we want you to tell us what based things you've been doing. You can message us on Twitter, Instagram, or TikTok, or send an email to based@redplanetshow.com. Include your name and pronouns if you're cool with that, and we may shout it out in a later episode. But for now, we are going to go into the news, and we've got a whole bunch of stuff to talk about this week. Soph, tell us about what's been happening in Paris.
Um, so the French police raided the Twitter offices, and I feel like a note that I should put on before all of the notes I've got written for this is just like we all are on the same page that like Elon Musk is part of like the network of billionaire pedophiles who have been trying to make the world more pedophile on purpose because they're all billionaire pedophiles. That's just gonna hang there, pin in that one. Okay. This week, the French cybercrime police raided the Paris offices of Twitter, social media site owned by Elon Musk, fascist boa, trust fund baby, and personal friend of Jeffrey Epstein. The company has been being investigated in France under allegations that the algorithm of the platform had been altered to affect the content seen by French citizens during recent elections. But after the recent developments with Grok, Elon Musk's automatic child porn and deepfake revenge porn generator, a probe has also been launched into prosecuting X for the generation of CSAM as well as Holocaust denial and other like extreme speech that other platforms are legally required to regulate. So this is from CNN. Prosecutor Laurie Buckow said the investigation, which initially focused on suspected abuse of algorithms, had been broadened to include Grok's sexual deepfakes and the circulation of Holocaust denial content. X Global Affairs Team account. I didn't check whether there are any names attached to this or if this is just Elon switching accounts again. Made a public statement saying the Paris Public Prosecutor's Office widely publicized the raid, making clear that today's action was an abusive act of law enforcement theater designed to achieve illegitimate political objectives rather than advance legitimate law enforcement goals. The allegations underlying today's raid are baseless, and X categorically denies any wrongdoing. It's quite unclear there if they are denying being a Nazi pedophile website or just denying being a Nazi pedophile website who also tried to interfere in French politics. Maybe it would be good to get comment on that. Um, Musk, who has repeatedly called for Europe to become more fascist and has spoken at multiple far-right political rallies, including the one where he did two Sieg Heils and the one where he called for Keir Starmer to be brought down by fascists, has said that the claims of X interfering with French politics were politically motivated and against free speech. So it's going well. It's going well for the big Boer birthday boy. Um, Any comment on this from either of you?
I mean, it's fucking, it's like, it's all like the whole Epstein thing is just insane because it's like it's Musk, it's all the same people. Like it's there's like we all know what like we this is my other little thing adding to this was I don't know if anyone has seen the sort of like the white hat guys that are recompiling the deleted Epstein or like the scrambled attachments, and like the very first one that they put back together is like a photo of like Musk, Deal, Zuckerberg, and Epstein at
Jesus
dinner together.
fucking Christ.
That
It is just
Epstein
it's
had
hard to
taken the
report on
photo and
anything else because it's
yeah,
everything.
but took a photo and emailed it to himself, obviously to hold on to it because he's like probably like, oh, okay, this is good to have. Um, and this was in like 2016 or something. So it's like all the same people. We know what we need to do.
Yeah,
Anyway,
I hate doing any discussion about Twitter, and I hate doing electoral politics. And both my stories are this week, but it's just like it's just such a surreal time. That's what's happening. I'm breaking my own
yeah.
rule here. Mule, you tell us about something a lot more revolution focused and actually like based in organizing.
Yes, it's very exciting. This is the news about the mass dock worker strike in the Mediterranean. So on Friday, the 6th of February, over 20 Mediterranean ports were shut down by their workers to protest the continued flow of arms and goods to so-called Israel amidst its continued ceasefire violations in Gaza. Led by Italian unions from all over the country, the strikes were not only against war and rearmament, but against the privatization of dock infrastructure, with banners like one in Ancona saying, "The port that resists wars, rearmament, and fascist laws." Striking, apparently, according to People's Dispatch, the impact of. Oh, hang on. Sorry, let me do that again. Striking workers and protesters in solidarity joined marches across the Mediterranean, and apparently, according to People's Dispatch, the impact of the strike was felt even before it fully unfolded on February the 6th, as reports emerged of ships, vessels that regularly transport military cargo to so called Israel, disrupting their itineraries due to the actions. Riccardo Petrolo from Italian union USB said, quote, "In actual fact, governments intend to force dock workers to become accomplices in permanent war policies that they're imposing on the general population when there are no enemies around. We say no to that. Neither dock workers need to be an accomplice in the Israeli genocide in Gaza by loading arms and components bound for Israel." I think that's a bit of a translation error there. I think it just meant no dock workers. End quote. The unionized dock workers are saying that February the 6th international strike is not the end point of their struggle against all wars. They are warning they have the power to shut down ports across Europe to deliver a massive blow to imperialist-backed conflicts and ensure that ports are places of peace free from any involvement in wars. Over the weekend, we also saw mass protests against the presence of the USA in so-called Israel at the Winter Olympics, with riot police attacking protesters in Milan, and the entire crowd in the opening ceremony booing so-called Israel. Extremely funny stuff. As we saw last year, Italian unions and workers have been growing in power under the fascist regime of Giorgia Meloni, proving that even direct state opposition to these kinds of organizations is not powerful enough to stop them. In Sorgiamo. So yeah, any comment on this one? I mean, we covered the stuff last year towards the sort of tail end of last year that was happening in solidarity with the Freedom Flotilla. Yeah, very
I
exciting
think
stuff.
I think we're seeing a little bit of a phenomenon of like very powerful unions in one country or region, like reaching. I'm not going to say the limit of what they can do on their own because like within their country they can still build a lot more and then have a lot more power just within their country. But I think this is to me this is something that's calling out for the return of the international. Like this is just like if different, especially workers of in the transportation industry, the shipping industry, like if they can work together to like damage the supply chain of this stuff at many points, it could actually like completely dry it up. Yeah.
Cool. Well, Tim, why don't you tell us about something incredible, some more great news related to Palestine?
Well, yeah, this is totally linked to also just what Soph just said. So the jury has acquitted the Filton Six of all major charges. So this is, yeah, there's the Filton Six. There's actually the Filton 24, I think it is in total. So the six were the ones with all the actual like proper major charges. I think the rest are like, co-conspirators and things like that. Dropped all major charges. I think one is still like there are still some charges against one of them, but
That's
then
right.
yeah, five of them have been acquitted of major charges. So yeah, they acquitted on all major charges after breaking into and destroying drones at a UK factory owned by Elbit Systems, Israel's largest arms maker. The jury's decision shows that ordinary people see the moral necessity of disrupting the weapons supply chain for a genocide. So these activists have been smeared as terrorists by the government and held on remand for 17 months in a blatant attempt to criminalize their solidarity. And this case exposes how the state acts as a repressive arm for imperial interests, using draconian terrorism laws to protect a war profiteer like Albert. So, yeah, five of the six are out on bail now, bringing to an end their illegal remand. So, remand is supposed to only be allowed for 6 months in the UK without trial. But yeah, so despite the judge trying to ban any mention of Gaza or Albert's role in the genocide, the jury understood the core issue that destroying weapons destined for Palestinians is a justified act of prevention. This jury nullification is a rare democratic check on state power when the law itself is complicit in atrocity. So, yeah, this is one thing the jury kind of the jury were able to see that all of the activists legitimately believed that like their actions were justified in defense of the Palestinian people who are currently under genocide. So it wasn't whether or not the genocide is actually happening. That wasn't within the scope of the trial, but it was like these people believed that this was about to happen and this was a reasonable response for people to do. So yeah, which is great. But yeah, this is this acquittal is a direct blow to the UK and Israeli government's campaign to crush the Palestine solidarity movement. It proves that public conscience can still override state repression, and it strengthens the legal challenge against the outrageous terrorist designation of Palestine action. And so, yeah, there was also they're trying to retry them, right? Like I was reading something about that just this morning before the stream, which is wild. Like, and they've been trying to bring in these like no jury trials as well, and this is like exactly the situation why, like, this is why they want those. They
They've been
want
pushing
to,
this for a while, yeah.
yeah, like they, yeah, realize in cases like this that the jury is going to side with, with the activists. But so what's the deal about them getting retrialed, because that seems like pretty wild
Well,
itself.
one of the craziest things about the retrial thing is that I don't know how it's being reported, but it's kind of necessary that they're going to have a retrial anyway for some of the charges, because there was aggravated burglary, criminal damage, and trespass. I might be getting that last
Yeah.
one wrong. But yeah, like the some of the charges the jury couldn't reach a verdict on. So I think that the retrial would have been necessary there anyway. So I don't know. I guess we're gonna have to wait and see.
Yeah, cool. All right. Well, yeah, so another Epstein related thing. Why don't you
Yeah,
tell us what's been going over on also in the UK?
I'm just living out this week. It's all spectacle. It's all
Yeah, it's yeah.
Twitter and online and posts and elections. I hate this. I hate this. I hate this. Let me out. Okay, so basically the position we're in the UK right now is the Labour Party, which is in power, is absolutely coming to pieces. And it's to do with Epstein. So, top British politician Peter Mandelson under investigation after Epstein files drop and Starmer wobbling. In September last year, British ambassador to the United States, Peter Mandelson, was fired for his position after public outrage at the length of his friendship with infamous paedophile child sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein. Mandelson goes way back. For people who don't know British politics, Mandelson is a Blair guy. Like, he's been in and out of British government for decades at this point. And he's We'll go on. A Wall Street Journal analysis of the Epstein files this week showed that Mandelson had one of the longest overall correspondences with Epstein out of any public figure in the emails currently in the public domain. This isn't just like an intensity of them knowing each other. There's plenty of stuff documented that people have been going through since the new drop about him, like basically Epstein and Mandelson acting as this like direct channel between like the most corrupt forms of like finance capital and the finance industry and the British government directly. And the British government, like the British economy is mostly money laundering for the American empire. So it's like our country is like the core financial organ of this conglomerate imperialism. So like this is yeah, like their relationship seems to have been this absolute heart of like pure evil. Mandelson has now stepped down as a peer from the House of Lords as well as having been removed as ambassador last year and is under investigation by the London Metropolitan Police. He was reported by the SNP and Reform. Several Labour MPs have been calling for Keir Starmer to step down for his association, and after a lot of pressure and more calls for the resignation of Morgan McSweeney, Starmer's chief of staff, McSweeney has now resigned. McSweeney is seen by many as being largely responsible for factionalism in Labour, or to put this slightly different way. For the aggressiveness and domination and the rise of the Labour right. So it's really obvious to everyone, even outside Britain, Starmer is just a puppet. Like you just look at the guy, he's a tulpa. And they're saying that McSweeney is like the one really ideologically driving like the fascist Labour Party. So him going is interesting. There'll probably be a leadership challenge soon. It's unclear how that all will shake out. I don't think there'll be a general election because there's no legal obligation for that to be one, and they'll just hold out. But I think Starmer's probably going to go really soon because of this. Mule, we were chatting about this before the show a little bit.
Yeah, I just don't think there's going to be a general election. I think that likely it's probably going to be a leadership challenge. The only option that Labour really have is Angela Rayner, I think. But even if she gets elected as Prime Minister, she's not going to be seen like Andy Burnham would have, who, was blocked from running in the by-election, a couple of weeks ago. That's going to happen here in Manchester. And I think that he would have been the only chance that Labour could have had for the public to see like an outsider of the faction coming in to try and like bring things back to a centre-left liberal position, which would have probably saved Labour, and we would have probably been rewarded with some very, very basic social safety net stuff, but endless capitulation to the USA regardless. That's essentially it. And I think it's gonna be shit.
One thing I think is important, and I was saying to you just before, like I just want to say this is like a lot of crazy shit that's transforming how we understand politics at the moment is happening rapidly, and something I think we just got to completely work from is the assumption that Labour is done. Like Labour is just, there is no saving the party. It's just cooked at this point. Yeah. But that's it. Yeah. Mule, you want to tell us about, again, something way more based and way cooler.
Yeah, extremely based. They are back again to form the Megazord of resistance in the Imperial periphery. It's Ansar Allah, aka the Houthis, assembling 2 million people in Sana'a in support of Gaza and Iran. So in Sana'a this Friday, after calls from Ansar Allah, also known as the Houthis, 2 million people assembled in solidarity with Gaza, Palestinians, and Iran against US and so-called Israeli aggression. Sweeping drone shots captured at the event show an absolutely awe-inspiring sea of people carrying Palestinian and Yemeni flags, burning US and Israeli flags. Ansar Allah have reaffirmed their dedication to the Palestinian cause, saying they will engage in action against so-called Israel if they do not stop ceasefire violations in the Gaza Strip, and they have also pledged direct military support to Iran if the US engages in military action against them. One interesting addition to the chants at the protest this time was an inclusion of a chant about Jeffrey Epstein. Alluding to the revelations in the Epstein files, the chant was, Quote, "Oh, all the peoples of Islam, silence his complicity in the crimes. Oh, all the people of Islam, rise up against the crimes. America and the Zionists, the accursed Jeffrey summarized it." End quote. As the world sees the end point of capitalism and imperialism embodied in Jeffrey Epstein and his pedophile island bullshit, they are indeed emboldened to act against it. So yeah, we've got the Houthis there, totally ready to move against the USA and Israel. But finish us off, Tim, with some more excellent solidarity news, again regarding Gaza.
Yeah, cool. So organizers are planning the largest civilian aid flotilla yet, with over 100 boats to break the illegal Israeli blockade of Gaza this March. So yeah, it's a powerful act of direct international solidarity, mobilizing thousands of people to physically challenge the siege that is causing a manufactured famine. The choice to launch the announcement from the Nelson Mandela Foundation in South Africa is deeply symbolic, linking the anti-apartheid struggle to the Palestinian cause. It highlights how Israel's policies are recognized globally as a form of apartheid and colonialism. So they're citing the ICJ's provisional ruling, which ordered that Israel not obstruct any aid as their legal shield. This sets up a direct confrontation, forcing the world to watch as Israel likely violates international law again to maintain its collective punishment. The mass civilian action underscores a total failure of governments and the UN to stop the genocide. When states are complicit, people are taking the extraordinary step of putting their own bodies on the line to deliver aid and witness the crimes because no one else will. So this, obviously there's been flotillas for decades going back now. But this one is going to be the biggest so far, like literally thousands of people involved, 100 boats, which so I feel like last time we were starting to see the limit of what Israel was actually able to deal with, which is like something that we've talked about a bit in the past with like protest actions, figuring out exactly what the police can respond to and how many people they can detain at one time and stuff. And so this is definitely going far above and beyond what we have seen in the past. So they are forcing a confrontation. They know this. I think there's no illusion that it's going to go smoothly or anything like that. But yeah, just exactly what happens is yet to be seen. But yeah, so that's happening. That's kicking off in March. So I guess we'll see how that goes. We'll obviously cover it in the news. And yeah, I mean, it's hopefully they get some aid through. Hopefully everyone is safe and no one nice is harmed. So I'm gonna say that. But yeah, that's the news for this week. Remember that Red Planet is made possible by the support of our viewers. If you like what we do, head on over to Patreon and check it out. There's a bunch of different tiers for different levels of support. But okay. Neil, do you want to lead us in? Yeah.
Yeah, cheers, Tim. So, with the eye of the empire firmly fixed on Cuba after Marco Rubio's ambitions materialized with Trump's bold statement about the island being a failed state and that it will fall soon, solidarity with Cuba is more important than ever. Here to talk with us about his experience in organizing for Cuba Solidarity is our amazing guest this week, Marcus, also known as Struggle4 on Twitch. Marcus, how are you doing?
Good. Can you hear me okay? Is everything good and fine?
Yeah,
All right.
crystal
All
clear.
right.
Loud and clear. Great stuff.
As a professional streamer, I know how it is. But thanks for having me. I'm doing well. As you were mentioning, Cuba is in a different space, and so many other parts of the world, as y'all were talking about as well. So
Yeah.
happy to be here. Happy to be able to speak kind of more directly to this issue, especially to, an audience that is outside of the belly of the beast that, at this point in time can really help out. So
Dope. So, let's get straight into it. Obviously, we know about the shit that the empire is saying about Cuba at the minute. We know that it's under threat. We know that it has been under threat literally since the revolution with the embargo. You had the, sort of like a quick brief for people who may not be familiar with recent history in Cuba. The sanctions and the embargo was kind of lessened a little bit under Obama. It's like the last thing that he did. It's like on the last day of office, he was like, yeah, we're going to have a bit of better relations with Cuba. And then as soon as Donald Trump came in, just absolutely slammed him again. Biden didn't help, and now Trump is, directly threatening Cuba, and of course, the effect that kidnapping of Maduro had on the trade with Cuba as well, I think has been affected, and also we've got Mexico that are now aligning with Empire and I think ceasing trade with Cuba. Ceasing, is it all trade markers or is it just oil shipments?
So as of right now, the Mexican government is discussing sending oil to Cuba without receiving any sanctions, because that's a new Trump executive order from I think the end of January, where any country that sends oil to Cuba, whether they're paying for it, whether they're just trying to give it away, they will receive sanctions from the United States. And as of right now, Mexico is in discussions to try to avoid that. If I wanted to hope against hope, Claudia Sheinbaum, her predecessor, Lopez, they both have been able to kind of be Trump whisperers on the world stage, avoiding a lot of the fire and fury that other countries get. Are they going to, is Sheinbaum going to be able to deliver on this case? I hope so. I don't have a lot of confidence in that hope. Because, with the, people behind Trump, Marco Rubio, and that's really, you stop at Marco Rubio, there is a list of people and actors, which I do encourage people. Belly of Beast has a fantastic line of like the history of Cuba. So, and then it's like a 5-part series over like the embargo over time, and it actually highlights like just the generations of, in some cases, like in Marco Rubio, someone like a Bob Menendez who's now in prison for corruption, who was a senator. There's a lot of actors within the United States, political scene that are expat Cubans, and then you have, a surrounding of other like Latin American descendants that also engages this like anti-Cuba lobby, which in some cases, like you had mentioned, since the revolution, in some cases this is at first just what they saw as like what they wanted to be as a colony acting out, but eventually as, the political, scene develops as this being, a now communist government, and then just, being in the shadow of empire. It's like, Russia's technically the first, like the closest country to the States because of Alaska, but like Cuba's 90 miles off the coast of Florida, and there's a whole history of like people even just make the journey on boats and everything like that. So that type of danger, that type of control, and, it's just something that like the United States can't help itself. And so at this point in time, with this oil embargo and with the last friends that they had, Venezuela and Mexico, Cuba is in one of the most dire situations that it's been in its history, especially post-revolution.
So, with that in mind, talk to us about stuff on the ground in terms of grassroots organizing. You engage in Cuba Solidarity organizing. Tell us a little bit about the org that you do that with, and tell us about what you do.
So I organize with the U.S. Hands Off Cuba Committee, which does a myriad of things. One is organizing solidarity trips to Cuba, in which case we can, hand deliver medical aid to, the hospitals, the major hospitals in Havana, and then meetings with different workers or, union leaders, meeting with the leadership of civil organizations, whether I have to deal with the LGBTQ plus community. The women's organization is a substantial organization in Cuba. It's actually like one of the organizations that actually develops into like leadership in the government when they're, with their leadership structure, going to the universities, meeting with some of the students and professors, which, another thing where the so like you vote for like class president or whatever. The class presidents then vote amongst themselves as a leadership for them. Those people who, these are students in university, they are also part of the government structure. They vote on legislation and all these things. So it's just, sorry to dive back, but it's just like these amazing
No,
things
no.
of like what democracy can look like,
Yeah.
and that we don't
It's
get to see.
yeah. It's like this
Um,
thing where we always get told that they're authoritarian, and then when you look at the structures, they're like, it's like people have this idea that democracy just looks like this kind of Westminster parliamentary kind of structure or whatever
yes.
that we're used to. And it's the same, and like you get there's like similar structures in like the DPRK and stuff like that. It's like
Yeah,
people
yeah,
end up with
yeah.
like far more actual democratic input on the things that directly affect them in their day-to-day life.
And
And
the
it's
thing
like,
is, you don't have to wait for the vote.
yeah,
You
yeah,
don't have to
yeah, yeah,
trust that somebody else is going to make the right decision for you. These
yeah,
are
yeah, yeah.
decisions that get directly made.
And you look at like the average citizens like actual political engagement, and they're actually like everyone is way more actually engaged.
Yeah,
It's yeah,
yeah.
it's yeah, it's such a huge thing. I always laugh when people call places like Cuba like authoritarian, because it's like, man, like look at what all of our governments are doing that we don't get to vote. Look at
Well, and
like
honestly, and I'll get back to the organizing stuff because there's within the past few years, there's been a incredible story about the democracy within Cuba and how it actually works.
oh yeah.
There's well, actually two instances. One has to do with the new union code,
Mm.
which I have a copy of. It's like a million fucking pages. I'm never gonna read it. But then there's also the new family code. The new union code has to deal with workers' rights,
I
workplace
talked about the new
environment.
family code in my latest video actually, because I was talking
Oh
about trans
cool.
organizing and I was saying like this is the kind of democratic model like Cubans
Yeah.
use. Like,
Yeah,
Mm.
and so yeah, it's very incredible because it does have to deal with these completely decentralized neighborhood structures. It has to deal with input of, thought leaders and community leaders within the pertinent organizations. And then so it's like you got all these meetings. So with the family code, it has to deal with like children's rights, and something like children, it is illegal to kick your child out of your home. And for
Mm.
any actual human, that it shouldn't have to be a law. It
Yeah.
shouldn't have to be a law, right? But we live on this world, right? And especially, from the United States context, the threat of throwing your kid out if, behavior, especially identity, is a huge fucking thing. You got all this engagement on the community level as to what they want. What do the people want? Right? They basically get a list of demands. And that list of demands goes over to the legislature and they start doing their debate as to what this law should look like from, the legal perspective, right? Then that goes back to these community orgs. They deliberate over what the legal people did, and they no, this is good enough. That's not good enough. This is good enough. Whatever. That changes. Goes back to the legislator. They do it as the law. It goes back again. Then it goes back, and so then on the final draft that hey, we agree on it. Then there's a completely everybody votes on whether this law passes. For the family code is an interesting thing. The first one failed, right? But then, right, they just do the same thing, make adjustments, right? And then it passes on the second thing. And this is where, yeah, like incredible things as far as protections for the LGBTQ community, protections for children writ large, and something that I think is incredible because it's something that, especially in the United States, that people don't, like a child is something to own. There's, especially when it comes to the reactionary right, there's a use of children to impose laws, and this is something from abortion to medical treatment to playing sports, you know, whatever it is, right? How do they weaponize their children to control society? And I mean, hell, even to who should be able to live in what neighborhood. Um, and but in Cuba, right, especially with this family code, it's instituted that children have rights and parents have responsibilities to ensure those rights. You know,
See, yeah.
this is a completely different concept to how things work in you know probably like the Western
Mm-hmm.
world. But and this is something that is created through democracy.
Mm. Yeah,
One
and
of the,
it's
I think
so
one of the
clear. Oh,
biggest,
sorry.
oh, I think one of the biggest things in terms of impact on people in society that the family code has done is redefining that a family can be lots of different things. Because like so many people I've known in my life have been raised by like their aunts or something,
Yeah.
right?
Mm.
And but they wouldn't, without going through a whole process, be like the legal guardian of someone or whatever. Like, and it's like
Oh yeah, yeah,
things like
yeah,
this that just like massively exclude very healthy, happy families that are
Yeah.
yeah.
not the nuclear family,
That's
like
actually like
from
a huge
benefits.
thing here. So we have in New Zealand. I also know this is a huge issue in Canada as well, where so we have there's a Maori practice of whāngai, which is like interfamily adoption. So like so one of my uncles, like when he was born, my grandma gave him to another family member to raise, who is not a direct family member. This is really common in Maori families and also in like other Pacific Island families, which is kind of like it's a legal gray area over here, which means that a lot of the time the organization, like you know the Child, Youth and Family Services or Oranga Tamariki, will just go and just take the child, uplift the child, put it directly into the foster system, and this will happen regardless of how happy the family is, how healthy the child is, all of that kind of stuff. But it's just because that child is not with the like the birth parents, and that there's been no paperwork solved or whatever like that. The child gets uplifted and taken away, and the birth parents and the adoptive parents can also be liable for like criminal charges and stuff. And happens all the time. There was like a gigantic expose recently where a lot of these kids were ending up in abusive foster foster care situations, even like human trafficking shit and stuff like that. And it's like this is a practice that has been going on since for hundreds of years, whatever like that. But there's no legal thing that protects like this tradition or enables it or anything
Exactly.
like that. But and it's like it is kind of like purely because it is also a way to like it's a tool of dispossession as well.
Yeah, the white supremacist West hates kids, and it's like it's a way to exert control
Yeah,
on
yeah.
the populace, you know?
I mean,
Fucking
yeah. It's like we could get into fucking Engels' whole like, like the family and the state. Like this is why a family is structured this way because it's a productive capitalist unit, which is all,
Engels had banger after banger, like
I know,
absolute
yeah,
fucking
yeah.
heater factory, that boy, like
Yeah, I
unbelievable.
come back to that book constantly. It's so good.
um
But yeah,
yeah.
I mean, these
But
are
we're
all
actually here to
different
interview
things. Yeah,
Marcus.
Yeah,
No,
yeah,
I
yeah.
I am I'm having a good time.
we're talking about
It's good.
Cuba.
Well, and because
Yes.
there's well, the thing is like there's I mean so many aspects though. It's like when you talk about like the control of children and
Yeah, yeah.
how the white Western world has done it, and especially comes to like indigenous populations,
Mm,
from like that slaughtered to these like schools that where they're taken away, stripped of heritage and all this type of
yeah,
control, and and that like really it's just insidious. Really,
yeah,
like I
yeah,
don't
yeah, yeah.
it's
It
just
is.
plainly
Yeah,
evil how so many power structures
yeah,
in any way they can, will
yeah, yeah.
utilize society, even the like youth, and that's
There
the
is
thing is
like,
that like,
yeah,
with the structure of the family, and I think like along the lines of something like this, I'm paraphrasing, right? But it is just a group of humans that wish to cohabitate and love each
yeah,
other. It's
yeah, yeah.
something like that's what the law is framed around as to like this is what a family. And even if you take away all of the evil history, some of this stuff is just bad bureaucracy.
Mm,
To the extent of parents tragically pass in some sort of scenario, what the matter in which the kids go from, one place to another, and whose actually wishes are taken into account. It's never the kids.
Yeah.
You're right. Like, and it's
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
you're talking about their life.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And they don't
It's
even
like,
ask these kids,
yeah.
like you got to be at least like 13, 14 for them to even ask you a question.
I see that a lot on, places like Twitter and stuff where it's like, you'll see anarchists kind of getting dunked on for like, talking about like, like children as a protected class or whatever like that. But it's like, I think there's like absolutely children as an oppressed class. It's like, this is absolutely an issue. And it seems kind of like a lot of people will be like, oh, that's like a white people issue.
That's the thing.
But
it's like, no, my parents are Jamaican. There's, I got my ass beat, as a kid, what I'm saying? Like bedtime is a thing. But when it comes to the rights, it is a form of just like literally separating a group of individuals from their rights until they age, quote unquote, into them. And it does this model does not perform well. This does not mean that like, hey, all right, well, kids get to go to the liquor store then, like that's not the case. It's just more about like, how do we define society and how do we structure it around to protect those people and and give them autonomy in a way that we give everybody else an autonomy, right? Within reason. Because it's the same thing too, is like, the comparison to children and elderly gets made a lot, and this can be a form of like, just like belittling old people. But this is something that we understand with aging. Your ability to perform all of the tasks that you used to diminish. And, this is just something that is known, right? And like,
you could just run a whole country. What are you on about?
I mean, hey, Joe Biden is the
Mitch McConnell is doing fine.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I don't live in a country that actually performs this. But and so as far as driving or operating heavy equipment, blah 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 blah, right? We have an understanding that we can give people autonomy with restrictions as to like what that autonomy entails. And so this is something that I think Cuba, and once again, this is through a democratic fashion. This is through the community coming together and talking to each other about what do we want for ourselves, right? And what do you get is, and I think a much more protective society around children, a much more helpful in a developmental sense. I'm like the big proposal, like, because I'd be the old guy. I grew up riding bikes and like parents weren't around, and what I'm saying. But I did, but like the society has to be safe for this. We have to understand that, then also like really develop the habits, and then just the societal know that a group of kids at a corner store are not a problem. Right? They're just customers, what I'm saying? They're just people hanging out.
It's one of the biggest, most impressive, I think, achievements of the revolution is the bringing back of humanity to understand that someone else's children is not necessarily someone else's children; they're our children, and that was the beauty of the law, the new family model was just absolutely. Like when I first read it, I've been Cuba pilled for a long time. I think anyone, as soon as you like start to learn about Cuba, and how shit actually goes down there, you're just like, yeah, man, I don't even care if they like put Western media journalists in prison. I actually don't give a fuck, because they just shouldn't be allowed there in the first place.
Like, is that all? Like,
we finish the ZAD doc off, and then we do several more like communes, and then we just do a doc on Cuba. Just do a very long
No, and I mean, and this is the thing, is like where the applicable Marxist, nowhere is perfect, everywhere can be critiqued, blah blah blah. But when it comes to what do we learn, because especially from the West looking down and just saying, well, blah blah blah, whatever, it's not helpful to their project. It is certainly not helpful to ours. And being able, and I guess, hey, I'll take it back. Because like you said, like once you start learning about Cuba, once you start learning about the revolution, and Fidel is easy to lionize and center on, but what the revolution is and what it's represented through history is so much more than Fidel, because in the United States, you've got support and connections with Black revolutionaries that helped develop our understanding
Asata
of
Shakur.
right. And I mean, this is where like that is Asada Shakur is just like a part, I would say small part of like, but like as there's so much as far as like their communications and developments with the Black Panthers and being able to develop a political ideology that not just understands our system, but how do we fight back against it? Um, when it comes to Cuba's support for Africa, and then, I think the war in Angola that was launched by like apartheid South Africa. 450,000 Cubans were sent over, a decade, and not just like military, but like doctors, teachers, people to help develop the community and lift it back up. And one of the battles, they had thoroughly defeated the South African, white supremacist military, and started entered into negotiations. And one of the demands was to free Nelson Mandela, and that was like the first thing that was happened after the end of those negotiations. So when people talk about Cuba, and this is the thing of not this is there's nothing on that island that makes those people different, except they just had a different understanding, right? And we're able to come together in a way that was way more powerful than any Caribbean island has yet to even attempt. And so, yeah, this is why it's at this point now it's important to support Cuba in any way that you can. I'm like getting emotional because like it's just this thing. It's like they've sent doctors to like after the fucking Chernobyl. You know what I'm saying? Like healing Ukrainian babies. Like and they're like this is a country that has shown a manner
Yeah,
of
yeah.
leadership in a world of depravity.
And like
And
trained
yeah,
so many doctors, like they were like sending out fucking free vaccines, everything
yeah,
like that. Like just this small island that is incredibly blockaded with very limited resources against all odds, like still doing the most, not just for their people, but for the rest of the world, like people that they'll never meet,
They managed to develop a 75% effective lung cancer fucking
Yeah,
vaccine.
yeah. They're like
Vaccine.
the
yeah.
Like,
inverse
what are
of
you talking
America.
about?
And so I was able to go to Cuba this past May. Going back is a big question for the organization, and at least in what capacity we can now. Um, but we were able to hear a talk from a biochemical scientist in Cuba. He's retired now, but he just kind of spoke to us about the breadth of what their work. The lung cancer vaccine is one of the things that is very popular. Some other issues that people might not have heard about is a medical therapy for people with diabetes who are at risk at losing a limb. It's like, and I'm not sure of the percentage, but it is an incredibly effective treatment to completely save the limbs. And, and that's the thing is like the pictures he was showing, it seemed more like magic than science because and honestly, I'm very queasy when it comes to this type of like medical stuff, right? But it was like, because very, very hard to look at to like a completely normal, foot or hand, what have you. There is also an Alzheimer's treatment that they've developed that can, like from what they could tell, it's like if you can, find it early on, they could basically stop it in its tracks. where it's at,
Holy
and
shit.
just like, basically stop the degeneration process. And it has to deal with like keeping just like the neurons that are connected, like still connected,
See,
and
now does Trump know about this? Because like he would
oh, he might be too
really
late.
benefit. No, but no, honestly, yeah, that shit is obviously like some of the most impressive, especially considering the embargo and the blockade. When it comes to other organizing that you've done with Cuba and stuff like that, because obviously the pressure is now on in
Yep.
terms of like what we can do in the West to like, well, just outside of Cuba, really. It doesn't even have to be the imperial core, but if you are outside of Cuba, from your organizing, what is it? What is the best thing that we can do outside of Cuba to support Cuba at this time?
So, and that's the thing. There's a bunch of different organizations that actually help, and I'm gonna get to like all the different like little like things that's like on the website, but on the U.S. Hands Off Community Cuba Committee, so U.S. Hands Off Cuba Committee.com is the website, but there is, whether it's supporting humanitarian aid and the collection of that. And there's like a lot of the medical aid that is very necessary to, because it is, Cuba has the doctors, and at this point, it is like the equipment has been starved off, and this plays out in a manner of ways, from pacemakers to like the syringe little catheters just to be able to hook up IVs. Um, so these are the types of actions that are the most helpful right now, because at this point, basically all that can get to the island are humanitarian aid boats. Um, and this is where it's also within the U.S. Hands-Off community, like of connecting your org to ours, so that like, and that's probably like one of like the easier ways. If you're already in an organization, just get linked up with us, and you'll probably talk to this guy Mark, and how, and that's the easy way, because like if people starting their own actions and their own drives is basically the next step in the process of, and so much of what we've seen over the past few years of just like any attempts to support Palestine. Like he talked about the like the flotillas earlier. At this point, flotillas can reach Cuba, and we know that now, and so that's kind of the focus. The next thing is pressuring your countries. If you're outside the United States, pressuring those countries to support Cuba, to denounce what the United States is doing, and do what they can to get oil there, because this is a very, very big deal. And that's where you see like something, like the project is pushed to the brink. There's so much Cuba has been able to survive, but the world exists as it does, and without oil at this time, this is the power to deal, the medical aid that they do, right? Hospitals, they run off that power, and this is talking about children's hospitals. Like this, it's the same thing. And so as this thing gets tighter and tighter, this should be seen as an ethnic cleansing campaign, because without the energy necessary to run these systems, you're throwing a whole society into the dark ages, within a matter of weeks.
Yeah, they want to Puerto Rico, Cuba essentially, right? Like Puerto Rico, I think has obviously got like a different history, but it is essentially like an occupation of a Caribbean island, and
Yeah.
by the United States, and
Uh,
it's going to end up being something like that, which would just be the most evil
and I
outcome.
mean, that's the thing, is that with even like with where like you said, there's a kind of this, I don't know, like history between Cuba and Puerto Rico as like sister islands, one that was able to break free, one that wasn't. And, at the end of the day, like the results, you know, because of this blockade are still, they're not too different. What the Cuban people have that, Puerto Rican people don't is, they still have their sovereignty, right? It just really ends at the shoreline,
Yeah.
or in the space in Guantanamo Bay, but and this is something that like you said, like they the whole all of the Caribbean, really, this is the United States, especially now under Trump, is focusing on the Western Hemisphere way more than they used to, and so this whole thing is a colonial project in so many ways. But with people like Marco Rubio, it's got these personal aspects to it, to where these people, Trump can have his mind changed. I don't think Marco Rubio can.
Yeah, well, that's the crazy thing, right? Because we've seen, um, I don't know. I think I missed your stream yesterday. I don't know if you covered this, but the talks in Iran appear to be going really well in Trump's eyes, and he says, "Oh yeah, well they didn't say that they were gonna not make a nuclear weapon 2 years ago, which is a lie, but now they're saying that they won't make a nuclear weapon, and so we're not gonna have to do anything else." And it's like, okay, and I all right, I guess that's the line as to what's going on. Maybe that's the excuse as to why they don't attack Iran, because by all evidence, they would probably get the shit pushed in if they attacked Iran. um but now Netanyahu is making these attempts to fly to Washington to try and change his mind, because obviously Israel doesn't want, they don't give a flying fuck about the nuclear program, because they know that the nuclear program doesn't exist. So all they really care about is reducing the ballistic missile range, so that they can freely attack Iran whenever they like. And it seems to be that is kind of what is fueling Trump's kind of ambitions, right? He has this notion that he is the peace president, that he's going to do all this stuff. He's setting his legacy because he knows he's going to die soon. Every day he looks at his hand and he goes, "Oh," and it's like, yeah, he's obviously trying to set his legacy in some kind of way, but he's just got all these evil fucking war hawks, like Lindsey Graham and Marco Rubio in his ear and stuff. Talk to us about what you know about Marco Rubio and his history with Cuba.
Yeah, I mean, Marco Rubio, and this is where, he's a former senator. Now he is Secretary of State. He's also National Security Advisor. Um, if anybody instead of describing these roles, I could say the last person to hold both of these roles was Henry Kissinger. So and so Marco Rubio and what is called like the Cuba lobby. And it's an interesting thing because like most times like pharmaceutical lobby, military lobby, whatever, it's in the positive sense, right? But the Cuba lobby is anti-Cuba, right? It might even go to the sense of like how the United States looks at Cuba, where it's like the leadership on Taiwan, right? Like there's like the leadership is in Miami, we just have yet to get the territory back. And Marco Rubio has been an aspect of that. Um, in some cases, Cuban diaspora, and there's, but this also extends to, just general fascist, Latin Americans of, all sorts of, stripes, so in this case, like, as Venezuela has been attacked, um, you see this, pops of other, like Maria Corina Machado as like one of these characters. And that's the thing is like Marco Rubio and Maria Corina Machado have known each other for almost 2 decades at this point, right? She has been one of these, anti-Chavista politicians in Venezuela. And as far as who Marco Rubio is and his function in the U.S. government is as a ambassador to the specific anti-left throughout Latin America, even as the United States has kind of like gone dormant in its just imperialist activities. Obviously there's like a large history, and actually I think I got some of it's close, but of U.S. imperialism in the country, or in Central and South America, and Marco Rubio is one of the ones that wants to harken back to that, as Stephen Miller is to harkening back to concentration camps for, Japanese people and, setting up his own Gestapo. Marco Rubio is there to perform this task, as more of like a core person of who he is as a politician. The fact that he has to fly to the Middle East every once in a while is, more of a side job for him. And that he gives up to, Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner at this point.
Yeah, yeah, he hands that shit off, definitely. Yeah, no, it's crazy, and it does just kind of like really feel like it's after the revolution in Cuba, you had the attempts by the United States to reassert the dominance over Cuba, like you were talking about, in terms of, basically essentially punishing it for daring to be communist, punishing it for daring to be socialist. And obviously, you had the Cuban Missile Crisis and all this kind of business happening. And it really does feel like that, we are just kind of getting to the point where like the people who remember, they have like the generational memory, like, maybe their dad owned a plantation in Cuba, or like their granddad or whatever, that it's this generational fascism where it's like, oh, I've found myself at the higher echelons of power in the United States because they've essentially gone, oh, you hate communism as well, don't you? Because remember your granddad, get involved, we'll give you a bunch of money, we'll send you around the world, whatever. And it really is, it just feels like it's that kind of like, it's that last ditch effort. Like when I look at Lindsey Graham, and when I look at Marco Rubio, not necessarily Marco Rubio, because I don't know how old he is. He's probably one of these guys that's going to turn out to be like 70, and I'm being like, what? But when I look at Lindsey Graham, it's like, he is Holden Bloodfeast. He's that meme that you see of like the senator from Iowa who's like, please, just one last time before I die, I want to see burning flesh. Please just let us nuke Iran. Please just let us nuke Cuba. Like, he's just that guy, right? And it's like, I hate to say it, but it's kind of just as simple as that, right? When it comes down to it, like I know you were just explaining that, but yeah,
no, that's so going on, and I mentioned Bob Menendez, who was a senator from New Jersey, which there is a substantial Cuban diaspora in New Jersey. There's a whole political industrial complex involved with it, and Bob Menendez, his son now, talks a little bit better, but I still got my eye on him. But he literally has his dad's old seat, and this is how these things, function. And another guy, there's a congressman from Ohio, which is funny because he played wide receiver for one of my favorite football team. But he is his family's Cuban, and he'd go on these rants against the regime and Castro and all this type of stuff. Turns out his grandfather was one of Batista's, the people who the guy who was overthrown, was one of Batista's lawyers, who fled and shaking in his boots, and so it's so many of these types of things. So like as you were saying, it's like it's not really a trope for some of these elites in the U.S. System to just be the descendants, of the slaveholders, and to still speak politically on that behalf, and that does play a function in the largest goal of U.S. imperialism and domination, and whether it is just controlling a territory, but definitely the fight of the ideological fight against communism, socialism, anything at this point that wants to give a kid a lollipop after a doctor's visit, that all has to be crushed at this point. And
yeah,
and Cuba, especially now that it's like, and not that I would say Maduro in Venezuela is performs as a government in a similar manner, but it they're trying to knock people off the board.
of course.
And yeah, now Cuba is just, it's like a little kid with a magnifying glass.
Yeah, no, for real, absolutely.
I have a question for Marcus. The the buildup around Venezuela was very focused around oil explicitly, but also there were threats of like a full-scale invasion and talking about like managing the country. Even in the wake of the kidnapping of Maduro, there was talk of like the U.S. managing Venezuela. And at this point, like Delcy Rodriguez has stepped in as a very competent like negotiator to some degree, and has been able to like strike arguably the only like deal that could be struck to avoid like invasion or war. There is a large degree of American control over Venezuelan oil, but Venezuela remains broadly independent of control outside of that for the time being. Do you see a possibility of something like this happening to Cuba? Because like I don't know what resource they would want other than the territory itself, but like if like Trump hates losers, right? And this all is, as you've pointed out, like a very ideologically driven revenge campaign by people, some of them who have like white or slave holding Cuban ancestors, some of whom just hate Cuba because, as you say, it's like the war on terror has become the war on sunshine and rainbows. The concept of children laughing. Um, yeah, I guess like, do you see any possibility of like them trying to pull off something more less chaotic and less liable to like leave them kind of in the lurch?
Yeah, because the thing is like I don't know. I don't know if there's a shortstop for Cuba like there is with Venezuela, because you point out the oil in Venezuela is, a thing that they want aside from, destruction of society. When it comes to Cuba, you know, I think they just want their ability to have, the sugarcane plantations back. And this is something where like Trump even mentioned that, talking about why Cuba has failed is because it's not produced as much sugar as it used to. And that, is like, well, it for one,
If
the
they had
sugar
more
that
oil,
well,
like
like
farming is generally
this is where
easier.
prior to the embargoes and these restrictions on oil, like they exported sugar, right? But they didn't make it their whole economy because this is not a slave state anymore. So you're gonna see a decrease in the goods produced by slaves when the slaves own the government now.
Gee, that makes sense.
Crazy. It is wild. But this is the thing that without that oil, without that type of thing that because this is where they had to bargain control over the society to get the oil, right? And Delcy Rodriguez was basically the only person who could deliver on that. If they start, getting rid of more and more and more, the ability for them to, control that oil goes away. Because at that point, right, the society might just, whoever's trying to get it is not going to have a good time. Basically, that's what they know. When it comes to Cuba, I think I think that it is on the international community to just overcome its fear, um, and support Cuba, because I don't think the United States will stop. Um, and
So,
yeah, and this is the like kind of the difficult thing with this type of, embargo. Well, and that's where it's like as long as they're seizing ships, this is going to be a problem, because this is not just a you're not allowed to do this. They are stopping ships. And so a country like Spain, is probably like the closest one that could try and pull something that would really piss him off. Mark Carney is good at making speeches, but if he is actually behind, right, the ills of the international order that he spoke to, right, get an oil tanker to Cuba, and
mm,
this is the thing that needs to be this is just the thing that needs to be done, and we need to find a way to get it done, the colloquial we. But
Mark
Yeah.
Carney and the rest of the international community's incredible dilemma between the billionaire pedophile club and the guys who send everyone well-trained doctors for free. It's
And their
really,
children are the
it's a really
happiest and
tough
least
time.
abused in the world. Like,
yeah,
But
yeah.
I have one quick also historical question. I've read in the book Half Earth Socialism about the like reforms that were not aimed explicitly to be environmental, but were done in Cuba after the collapse of the Soviet Union because the Soviet Union was providing them with a lot of oil, and so they suddenly had a much harsher time. And this is the thing that has resulted in there being a lot more vegetarianism in Cuba than there is in other countries, and a lot more riding bikes, a lot more home growing of vegetables, historically. And I'm just wondering if like I guess I'm assuming you're broadly aware of this history. And I'm wondering, my question is about like what you know of organizing that's happening in Cuba to like deal with the stepped up like pressure from
Yeah.
like from Trump's regime.
Well, and like even with um the restrictions on the oil, this is a scientific society and climate change is real. So the ability for Cuba to support itself not only past the embargo, but in a manner that is in conjunction with society. There's a manner of programs that are instituted on multiple different local levels. This is not necessarily, a Cuban government, like national government thing. But and that's like this is where I'm aware of programs that like basically mix between like universities and communities on how to not only just have uh basically like little backyard gardens and stuff like that supplement their ability to attain groceries and stuff like that, but now taking that a step further into developing like cooperation amongst neighbors, and also in a grander sense of growing. So they're actually purposely going to start growing products that will just be collected to be utilized in another sense, and they actually start getting payment for that type of thing. But yeah, which I think is like, and this is where utilizing just every inch of your place as a sustainable and useful thing is really like they're having to learn the lessons that I think all of us should be less learning right now as to like, what does our day to day look like, making sure that, oh, hey, it's my turn to water the garden, or, collect up some good to make sure it delivers all to get somewhere that it needs to be as just a regular function of the day, and not so much, the grind of you work and then you play and you disassociate from everybody around you and, all that type of shit.
So going back to organizing stuff, because of course the mission statement of Red Planet is to get all the armchair communists, theory nerds on the internet out of their parents' basements and out into organizing world. Tell us about how you got started in organizing with the US Hands Off Cuba campaign.
So with this, so Struggle4, we try and get out there and cover stories as we can, or get interesting stuff, but so we'd gone to the Democratic National Convention in Chicago, and this is when Kamala Harris was officially selected as the person running against Donald Trump. And there was a lot of focus on the genocide under Joe Biden. And so we went there filming, and there's this guy, Mark, who is one of the leaders for U.S. Hands Off Cuba Committee, and he just came up to us and asked if we wanted to talk about Cuba. We said yes. Eventually he's like, "Do you want to go to Cuba?" We said yes. And then about 10 months later, we were with Mark in Cuba. And so that's like the simple thing of it. It's just kind of, for one, already getting out there and just allowing yourself. And this is where I like this. Is like, allow yourself to be organized, right? No one's expecting you to be Lenin. And so just if someone offers you a chance, an opportunity to be a part of something, just say yes and get told what to do. And that's what I did. Yeah, well, that's the day we got Havana syndrome. Mark gave it to us, and we zombified ourselves over to Cuba. Um,
It's true. It's real. Discombobulated. Yeah.
yeah, but so that's it, and the thing is, there's fundraising involved. We filled 2 suitcases full of a bunch of medical aid and stuff like that. Some soccer balls, for the kids. Um, and we're able to give, somewhere around 60, I think, of like large suitcases just full of all sorts of stuff from like some of the stuff like I was listening to like these needle catheters, medications. um that's kind of like the more of like the daily grind is just like, for one, how do you get there and how do you bring as much as you can there to help out. um I would really, and especially for U.S. Hands Off Cuba, we're specifically, the organization does try to focus of working with the CTC, which is the basically like the central union, in Cuba. So it's like the basically half of the government of, just the collection, the pyramid of unions that just flow, out from under them. But so our partners with them. So this is where we get a lot of meetings from government officials, and get a little bit talk of how the Cuban, society operates at a higher scale. But there are other orgs that do a lot of just like hands-on humanitarian work with, the community, different communities in Cuba. So there's a myriad of ways. I'd say if you're outside, if you're not a U.S. citizen, just go, right? Like, it's gonna be shitty. There's gonna be rolling blackouts, but bring cash and fucking spend it. Spend it on whatever. Throw balls of cash at them. Everything's gonna be so cheap. Tips are double what you pay for it. Um, if you're outside of the United States, like one of the ways is because like, and this is the thing is where with the system, they don't or don't have access to outside currencies. And so this is where tourism at this point in time, can be, it's not going to be, oh, hey, everybody's bringing you drinks and you're getting the jet set all over the fucking place. But it is a way that if you can get there and, your $5 is going to go so much more. And also that currency within the system is useful. And so these are some of the things that like, anybody can do, and really it's like, as far as getting to Cuba, if you're in the United States, there's only a certain way you can go. And it's with a group. You can't be a tourist. You can't enjoy, quote unquote, the island, so we went as an education, ours is an educational thing. There's humanitarian efforts that you could also go as. Um, but yeah, that's really it. And, I've kind of been sucked into an org that has been doing this type of Cuba solidarity work for a long time. Um, there's a lot of good mentors within the org that I learned from about just a lot of the history of organizing that they've been involved in, all types of union guys and, using people and, that are a part of the org that, you know, have whether they're doing salt exercise trying to like get union places in work, where all sorts of strikes, all sorts of work. One guy had been actually targeted in COINTELPRO by the U.S. government, so um I'd say organizing is, and just being a part of an organization and just trying to stay curious is something that I found it really it helps me out and like makes you just stay grounded, because they know that like, hey, a loss doesn't mean everything's lost. I think that the especially left online, one bad thing happens, oh, it's all over,
Yeah.
but
Doom pilled. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
but Elon Musk has not destroyed the earth yet. We've got a
Mm.
chance still. And so yeah, like how did I end up here was just taking a step outside and staying curious.
You experience the tactile sensation of grass.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, not to water it down a bit, but yeah, I don't know, because it is super interesting, like having like known you for a fairly decent amount of time now, and like known your sort of like trajectory. You went from like vet, and I don't know if this is offensive, but like poverty draft vet, like that's how you've described it in
Yeah,
the past,
yeah,
like
no, and it's so that's but
yeah,
yes, go on. It's
and then.
fine. Poverty vet. Yeah, yeah.
You went from that to like radicalized, sort of like politically engaged, to like staffer, and then like for the Democratic Party, and now you're like on this sort of like other side of it, where it's like, yeah, fuck the Dems, we're doing Cuba organizing, this is how we do it. So I wonder if like you had any kind of insight from your experience, because that's like it's such a broad experience that you've had.
Yeah, I swung. I took a right,
Yeah,
just like
it's
and
impressive.
hey, thanks. I like to, just get a good experience in life, be a fucking agent of child soldier, agent of empire, to radical, it's great. Um, but no, I think that, first off, especially is like being, a veteran, is understanding not only like who I was, and you mentioned the power draft, who I was, who are most of the people that end up joining the military, and that's the thing where like you've got this what else am I going to do aspect of it. There's a familiarity. A lot of current service members are also the related to veterans in some way, so to the extent that anybody a left veteran, somebody like their willingness to speak out to the people in their community, especially their family members, is very important to make sure that people don't see this as a good option. And that's where they may not come from it as like, hey, the U.S. government is an empire, and I'd say the same, similar things for the U.K., military. The U.K., they don't have to have an understanding of capitalism and imperialism as long as they know that this isn't a good place to actually have a good career. Bring up anything from PTSD to, the United States, you are more likely to be sexually assaulted if you join the U.S. military, right? If you join the U.S. military, you're just more likely to be sexually assaulted, period, across the board, man, woman, NBs, anything. And people, don't need, oh, but look at all the bad things it does, right? It can kill you. It will hurt you. And, there's very little experience outside of those two things. And a lot of people just cover it up when they say it doesn't. So that's kind of where, especially as like a veteran of like, hey, this is where like the focus was the left flank, and then, even just and then going in understanding of government, it was that, hey, I want to change things, so when I get starts in staffing, just a baby bird thinking that, hey, this system can be changed. This is a democracy, you know what I'm saying? And it was during COVID that I was like, oh, this is bullshit. And it was the depravity of the U.S. government towards its own citizens, you know, um, where it's like, this can't be saved. In my head, I was almost absolving a lot of the issues of imperialism across the world because it's not in your face, and people will get it, but it's not the thing. It's like they just don't care. They'll throw anybody into the meat grinder. And yeah, when it was through COVID that I, was staffing, and, it was Trump's first term, and yeah, it was the policy that was being generated from Congress, and then, getting calls from constituents, from people, just in the worst way, begging for help. And I, at that point, right, I knew everything I needed to know to be keenly aware we could help every single person, and we choose not to. Because as far as the money spent, I knew how, my old boss was an appropriator. I know how this thing works. I know where the money goes. I was there as they're drafting their laws. Me and many other staffers are telling them this isn't going to work. This is going to be a giveaway to the big banks. This is going to be a giveaway to the big corporations. This isn't going to work. It's not going to work. They do it anyway. And when the people call me crying, I was just like, man, fuck this. And I kind of like a mental breakdown because like I was very fucking depressed. But at that point, that was really the moment where it's like, it can't be saved. It needs to be, our society needs to be different, period. You know?
Yeah. Completely radicalizing experience. Thanks for sharing that, man. Yeah, really appreciate that. I think the reason I wanted you to talk a bit about that is so that people understand that, like, no matter how fucking liberal they might think that they are in terms of like, no, but I really do think that we should vote. Your particular experience on that is like, yeah, but you vote for these people, and the people who work for these people will tell them all the time, hang on a minute, this isn't what the people who voted for you voted for. You're betraying them, you're doing this, and they don't give a fuck, and it's completely fucking evil.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And like in my personal experience, like my old boss is, I think it's a good person. Their personal votes, I think, for the most part are good. But this is the thing is that, like you said, if I guess they used to be one of the lucky ones at some point because we would say this sucks to them. So many other of these offices are just filled with sycophants that want to climb the ladder and eventually just steal the seats of their boss. I mean,
Career politics.
DC in a lot of ways is a fucking cesspool. It's
Yeah.
but
I think we
yeah.
should go on to audience questions, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So,
Do you have them up?
yeah, I've got them up here. So, Marcus, we've got, I think, maybe 15 minutes to do this. So, if you want to just give one word answers, that's up to you. So the first one is from our friend Complainy Laney, who says, so I saw Medea Benjamin of Code Pink is taking a shipment of lentils to Cuba. Is there other direct ways to help through these sanctions?
And so mentioning Medea Benjamin, and this is organization Code Pink, and this is one of the, Code Pink is a broad brush anti-imperialism, and they do have a lot of work in that we even do conjunction with, as far as supporting Cuba. And so if Medea Benjamin is inspiring you, codepink.org, get involved because, if you see them doing good work, get in there. It's a great feminist org. I had the honor of actually interviewing Medea Benjamin at the People's Conference of Palestine. Fantastic organization that I'm trying to get my mom, red pilled enough to to get involved in. But if you are in an organization, please contact the U.S. Hands Off Cuba Committee. We'd love to make connections with orgs and to be able to develop lasting relationships, but also, getting, when you have a meeting, just being able to talk to everybody in a group. Hey, here's the manner of ways that different groups come, or it can help, whether it is just advocacy or to collecting, physical goods yourselves, finding shipments, because in some cases, utilizing the connections that we have in the labor as far as shipping, sometimes we're able to get, a container onto a cargo ship. Sometimes we are just supporting other organizations that are getting the aid, there somehow. So this is a network that supports Cuba, and any org that is just human beings, because this is where labor unions, civic organizations, everything, people of conscience can get involved either. So it's whether joining those orgs and getting involved through those aspects, or your organization contact U.S. Hands Off Cuba Committee through, the website, U.S. Hands Off Cuba committee.com. And yeah, we'll figure out how we can get it all together.
Dope. Thank you very much. Tim, do you want to do the next one?
So, from Prince_infidel, Q, after decades of propaganda, what can we strategically do to get everyday people in the US and other imperial states on Cuba's side?
This is a tough one. And actually, I think when you'd first mentioned, getting me on, this is prior to Maduro being ousted.
Yeah.
and I was supposed to come on here and talk about the Let Cuba Play campaign, which was supporting Cuban athletes getting visas to be able to just, and this was an effort to broaden the scope of outreach just to get more people's eyes on you, to piggybacking on the Olympics. Obviously, at post Maduro, the world has completely changed, and so the focus has changed. At the end of the day, it's hard for me to say because there's so many things that we see, and like what's going on in Palestine or Sudan, or I mean, like fuck, even when it's white people, Russia, Ukraine,
Mm.
the ability to stop conflict is something that is just beyond me, and convincing people otherwise, and convincing people against these narratives. And um I guess like the simple thing is first, you know, get educated yourself so that when these things, do arise, you could say, no, Cuba isn't authoritarian. They actually
Yeah,
have this
yeah,
incredible way of democracy and community organizing.
yeah,
No, Cuba isn't evil. They send doctors all over the world, that they can, if people aren't curious where the first place Mandela went when he traveled as the president of South Africa. If people aren't curious to where that is and why, right? I don't know what to tell them, right? But these are the things that Cuba actually represents in the real world. And for people in the West, myself, my former self included, you know, it's just these things aren't true. We've been fed, a whole lot of lies. And I guess with anybody, if you're having a conversation or whatever, I'd hope is like they want to know the truth more than they want to be right. And if you want to know the truth, when it comes to Cuba, there's so much incredible and rich history there, and not just in the political sense. There is also, culture and music. Oh my God, right? And we talk about jazz coming out of Cuba, like in athleticism, like their performances, like in the athletic field. And this is it's funny to watch, like, goddamn Fidel go crazy on the basketball court and shit. But these are all things that are incredible that make any, society, any culture rich and worth engaging. Cuba is just a place. There are people, and they've done incredible things across the world, and that should be respected. And like in the face of it, they're being starved, and hopefully people would be against that. You may not be a pro-commie government. You may think Castro was, I mean, he's been dead now for over, for like decades now. Yeah, like you might, even if you disagree with it, starving a nation isn't right.
yeah, 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 yeah,
So
totally. Yeah, yeah. No, that's a good way to put it. But yeah, we got one. Oh, it's a two-parter here. Soph, do you want to read out the two-parter question?
Yeah, sure thing. So I'll read the first part first, and you can answer them separately. Tim or I could says, one, recommend books on it's recommend books on one, the post-revolutionary history of Cuba. Slightly earlier is fine too, but I'm particularly interested in what was going on after, both the good and the bad.
oh, okay, I'm supposed to answer that now. Um,
If you
sorry, I didn't
can.
know. Yeah, I can't. I was gonna the book recommendation I did have just over like the general area was Open Veins of Latin America. Is a pretty well known book as far as like getting the understanding of the history of Latin America, especially from their perspective and the histories there of U.S. imperialism, but just imperialism, across the board. Obviously, Spain had, quite a bit to do there. But so yeah, I'd say Open Veins of Latin America. As far as Cuba and books describing that time period, I am at a blank. Um, a lot of the stuff. Yeah, a lot of the stuff that I've read is just either the writings of Castro. Some of this, there's a book, how far slaves have come. that is like a mixture of like speech between Mandela and Castro when Mandela was in Cuba, but then also writing so that one actually does go into a little bit over the transitionary period of the, and what was going on in Cuba. Um, but yeah, I don't know. Then the classic is reading Fidel's speech, History Will Absolve Me. That's a classic, yeah. So I don't know.
I gotta check that out
I'll
myself.
try and find something better though.
Those are great recommendations. Thank you. And I'd add to that also like the Blowback podcast just did a few did their whole season on Cuba that I think is
Yes.
generally like that might have been the biggest update in my understanding of everything about Cuba that I had at any point. Like that was just such a detailed thing. And then part two, it's still book recommendations. So book recommendations on the current political and socioeconomic organization, like how things work in Cuba now.
So and this is where, as far as like the political organization, and this is where it's like of a base of, like Cuba exists in a, kind of like a bicameral state. The president largely acts as a figurehead, and stamps things through, and then, and then there's like the operating of the, government but so the half is the legislature, the other half is this collection of unions, and basically every worker is in a union. You vote for union leadership, right? And that union leadership, eventually as you get up and up and up and higher and higher, you actually then have positions in the government. And this is where the legislator, as they're developing laws, all of these things have to go through the pertinent worker class, right? With whatever they have to do, right? So if there's something with schools, the unions of teachers and school administrators will be involved, but then also, construction and, those unions, they both come in, then, agree with the legislator on how this thing goes, and then that law ends up being passed, and the development of those schools are in line with the process developed by the workers, from building to teachers being fielded. And so, this is basically how most law and everything like that is gets passed in Cuba. As far as the economic standpoint, and this is something that, because of the blockade, has gone through, ups and downs. First, post-revolution, and with the existence of the USSR, Cuba exists in, I mean, as far as people that I've talked to that was, visited Cuba at that time, the socialist utopia is a thing. Like massive developments, huge rates in literacy and health, and all across the board. Unemployment, what's that? So all of these things. Then you have the U.S. laws then starting to get passed to implement the blockade, and then fall of USSR 90s, and then this really becomes a different stage for Cuban history, that gets, harder and harder and harder the farther away you go from the fall of the USSR, until you get Barack Obama, in which case lifted some stops, of the blockade, and almost instantly, right? It's like a exponential trajectory. Like, once again, like the ability for Cuba to rise is based off of the oxygen entering the system. So there's a lot of tourism and stuff like that. Probably one of the issues though is that the Cuban government essentially thought, hey, this is the new order. We'll at least be able to get substantial tourism. The government starts investing in tourism. Trump comes back in and then cuts that off. And so now Cuba has been in that detrimental state, going down and down, whether it's the U.S. state sponsor terror list that they put on, to now these tariffs that they're threatening any countries if they help. Um, the the system itself is really just being starved of its energy to survive. But as far as like like a system, I mean, really, like going to Cuba, you notice the forced poverty. It's undeniable. but it's like everywhere else, it's got it's like everywhere else, you know what I'm saying? It's really, there's so much that is talked about and so much been done to it, but it's people go to work, taxis driving by, it's a normal shit. So
We're all deathly poor because of capitalism, but the poorest are those who dare to do socialism. Yeah, no, absolutely great answers to some good questions, and thanks so much for coming on the show. We did ask you, I think, for some homework that you were going to give our chatters regarding Cuba. I don't know if you have any ideas of like something practical or tangible that people listening or watching or are in the live recording of the show right now could do for Cuba. Do you have any idea?
I would say, and it is like even the small things of, especially some of the links of those aid sites, just at the very least, if you don't have a dime in your pocket, you can share these links with your network on the social media, right? Even, we're all broke, but sharing is free. So just getting the word out and letting people know of the needs of Cuba, but then for the go-getters, if you're in organizations, I can't say it enough. Please reach out to the U.S. Hands Off Cuba Committee, on behalf of your org, and let's build out a network that doesn't just operate, because this is where, like I said, I met Mark, one of the heads at the DNC. This is, Cuba is solidarity. So the Cuban solidarity work is that in itself. We are a network of people that just want to make the world better in our own way. We're covering down on this, but we want to be connected and work with all of the other people doing all the other things. So that way, hey, when Cuba's in trouble, we can send out the beacon, but also whenever any of the orgs need help, we want to be there as well. So thank you for having me, and let me talk about Cuba and all the great questions and all that stuff.
Our absolute pleasure, Conrad. Thank you so much for joining us. And yeah, hopefully we could get you on in the future to give us an update.
Oh, I'd love that. I'd love that. And good things update.
That'd be really
so
good.
We'll hope for the best.
All right. Thank you so much. See you later now. All right. Yeah, an absolutely phenomenal guest. We've had so many guests this year, and we're going to have another guest as well next week. It's really exciting. Red Planet's back. We are so back. And that's just how it is. But yeah, we can only remain back if you support us on Patreon. Please.
We can only get more back if you support us.
That's right. That's exactly right. Please head to patreon.com/red_planet and support us at any of the tiers that are listed there. There's 4 different options, I believe. There's loads of different awesome rewards that you can get, including listening to bonus episodes, getting some little bits of merch sent to you. But the top tier of support that you can give us is our sicko mode tier. And what that gives you is a thank you at the end of every show, which looks like this. Thank you so much, Risk Inverse, once again, for continuing to be our sicko for the longest time ever. Thank you so much for supporting us. And of course, you could support other people who are on the show with me doing the hosting, because we work quite a bit to do this show together. Tim has to get up at 6 in the morning. It's on a Monday, every Monday. To do the show. It's insane. Whereas me and Soph are just chilling on Sunday. But yeah, if I wanted to support Tim, where would I go and where would I do that? And what would I look at?
You can find me on Twitch and YouTube as Conquest of Dread, or on Twitter and Blue Sky as Dread Conquest. Yeah, I'm most active on Twitter, probably. Not so much on the others, but I have been considering a return to just like casual streaming on Twitch, maybe doing some gaming streams and stuff.
Oh, it would be so good.
Yeah, it'll probably be late at night my time though, which would be like sort of 12 hours. Well, no, more like 9 or 10 hours from now-ish. But yeah, So yeah, doing that. And also I've got a tabletop RPG that's coming out soon called Dark RPG. If you jump on Twitter and go to Dark RPG 2000, you can see a little bit about that. There's not that much on the Twitter page for it yet, but it's very close to being done. I've got I was gonna show you, but the preview copies I've got are actually sitting underneath that board that is drying that I just painted. They're like propping which is like, like they're really important things that I'm taking good care of, obviously. But what if I wanted to hear more about Mule? Where would I find out more?
You can find me on pretty much all platforms as DJ Mule. That's DJ Muel. I do a Twitch stream that is Monday to Thursday every week. Start around 6 p.m., 5 p.m. UK time. Cover the news, try and assess it from a anti-imperialist and a communist perspective, trying to look at the way in which the empire is falling apart. Obviously, it's very interesting and insightful at the moment. Wacky, some might say. A little crazy, a little weird. You can support me there. You could also check out my YouTube channel if you liked the story about the Filton 24 activists that Tim was talking about before. I'm going to be doing a video on that pretty soon, so that is in the works. It's currently half written, and I'm hopefully going to be finishing the script this week, and that should be out the week after. So make sure you head over to my YouTube and also check out my Patreon as well. But you can find all of my links at linktree.ee/DJ MUEL. But if I wanted to check out Soph's stuff, where would I go for that?
I'm on 3 social medias at the moment: Instagram, Tumblr, and Blue Sky. I'm way off of Twitter. I'm all the way off of Twitter. It's good being off of Twitter. I'm trying to actively reduce, but I'm a YouTube video essayist, and I primarily make my money through Patreon. So patreon.com/Sophie from Mars is my main source of income. All my links are at Linktree, linktree.ee/Sophie from Mars. The places that you find me doing my content online are my YouTube channel, my Twitch stream, which is on Fridays, where we look at liberal slop, like Ezra Klein's podcast, for example, and on my Substack, which sometimes if you like my Substack, if you like reading stuff from me so much on Substack, then there's also my Tumblr, where I definitely also like go on too long about theory stuff sometimes. But yeah, just broadly, like those are the places you can check me out. My YouTube channel, my most recent thing was a video about trans organizing and the kinds of organizing that trans people need to do for us to get liberated. And hopefully sometime this week I'll show up on Mule's stream and we'll have a watch of it. Yeah, there's more stuff coming up. So basically, just it's a great time to subscribe to my Patreon. There's going to be some stuff there soon, and you can find all my links on Linktree. We have a great interview coming up next week with someone involved in community gun training and self-defense preparation, which I think is going to be a really, really cool episode. So definitely make sure to make it for next week, and we'll see you all there. Bye.
See you then. Bloody great that.
He's really